So let me introduce you. We have two speakers today. One is Professor Kumar Suresh, head of the Department of Education and Administration, National Institute of Education Planning and Administration. He has done several studies on the leadership. In fact, he conducted a leadership development program for about 40 to 55 senior academics in the country over a period of 1 month or so. And I also interacted with some of the participants. So he is well versed with the concept of leadership and, in fact, a leader as an executive. So we have Kumar Suresh from NIEPA, National Institute of Education Planning and Administration. We also have Professor Pushapnandham Karanam, who is also the head of Department of Education and Administration in MS University of Baroda. MS University of Baroda is having the Center of Advanced Study in Education, and one of the area where they are having is the educational administration, education management, what name sometimes they call it. So we have two speakers on today on this subject, and I would first like to give to Dr. Kumar Suresh to initiate the presentation. Dr. Kumar Suresh will initiate the presentation. Followed by that, we can have a question answer. It is a 2-hour session. Our session, part of session would be over at 8 o'clock, and we'll have 10 minutes break, and then we'll reassemble after 10 minutes. Dr. Sharma is traveling from Bangalore to Delhi. He is maybe in the flight, so he couldn't join us. And Vivan is also traveling to the Guwahati from Tura. So I think he's also stuck up somewhere. We will start the program, and those who are on the way, they will join, and then we'll see. May I request Dr. Kumar Suresh to initiate the presentation, and then we'll have interaction with the participants on the subject.
Okay. Very good evening to all of you. And thank you, sir, Professor Sharma, for giving this opportunity to me. While introducing to the audience, you already indicated that I had opportunity and privilege to organize leadership development program, not one. 4 such programs I had organized here in NIEPA. And during our program, we also come across a number of issues and issues related to leadership in higher education. So I'll also take you from our earlier insight gathered through our interaction with senior faculty who are also heading either department or faculty and others. But today specifically we have been asked to talk about executive leadership. This executive leadership is not exactly the traditional leadership on the one hand, and also not typically academic leadership. Academic leadership, as I understand that academic leadership is very much evident in the case that all of us taking one, part of academic responsibility or other. That could be one. But if you are talking about executive leadership, it has a specific connotation. What I propose to do in this case, why we are talking about leadership in the first case. This question needs to be answered. In the first case, why do we need to talk about leadership in general and executive leadership in particular? Can we think and can we imagine executive leadership without making reference to higher educational institution, without making reference to context of higher education? So that is also important to understand. Unless we make reference to the current context of higher education, perhaps we may not be able to make sense of our discussion, meaningful discussion with regard to leadership development program in general, and also our discussion about executive leadership. That is, therefore, and this is equally important to discuss the context of higher education and connecting this to the needs and challenges of executive leaders. Third, if you are talking about executive leadership, what are the attributes? Whether these attributes are fixed for all the time, or there could be possibility of variation. I would like to take a position on this. That of course certain skills may be considered as relatively, constant, but others definitely are subject to, change, modification, and this also defines the space of dynamism in the case of higher education. So, what I'm proposing to do, three important components of my deliberation in this session. Of course, I'll be flagging in some of the aspects of executive leadership, some of the issues and challenges. What are the specific attributes or skills of executive leadership? What needs to be done or what needs to be discussed if we are aspiring for executive leadership positions. So these are some of the aspects which I'll be discussing with you. So, three important components of my deliberation. First, I would like to also, before coming to the executive leadership issue, it is equally important to understand the context of the this will help us to understand executive leadership, changing role, changing responsibilities in a better way. So therefore, first component would be about the context of higher education. That is one. Second component I would also like to reflect on. I understand that since I was also part of some of the discussion with Professor Sharma and other members of the advisory group. So I am aware about that considerable literature already provided to all of you on the theme of various themes and aspect of leadership. So that is already in place. So therefore, it is equally important to understand about certain skills of leadership in general and executive leadership in particular. That is the second component of my deliberation in this interaction. Third is, third component of my deliberation is more focused on, the changing context of higher education. In this case, what are the specific requirement and needs of executive leadership, especially in our own case of higher educational institution. So if we just start with the first component, that is related to the context of higher education. All of us belong to higher educational institution. We have, considerable exposure to variety of issues and challenges in higher education. Can we imagine leadership in the same way it was supposed to be some decades back? Perhaps not. Why this is not? Because the context of higher education administration and management has been changing over the decades. And therefore, certain, identifiable developments in higher education is definitely in place. And if we are talking about executive leadership, definitely these aspects have to be taken into consideration. So first, if you just see what kind of change is there in terms of administration, or governance of higher education. First important attribute, on the basis of literature, on the basis of available resources, I'm able to identify one very, very visible impact or trend in higher education, that is a shift from input-based, administration to outcome-based administration. If it is so, the focus is more on outcome based. So this aspect also has to be taken into consideration. If you are given the responsibility of executive leader, heading the institution as a principal, as a vice chancellor, pro vice chancellor, and others, definitely this aspect has to be taken into consideration, that every time you will be also, or all of us would be also subjected to ensure that our administration is not just input based, but outcome based. It should result into certain, outcome. That is first important trend I could identify in case of higher education governance. Second is about shift from rigid, control model of administration to a more flexible, say, mode of administration, command and control. That was basically, emerging from organizational, classical organizational theory of educational administration and management. Now there is a shift from this kind of rigidity or rigid rule-based administration to a more flexible, and enabling, rules which can lead to outcome-based administration. So, traditionally it has been, say, understood that administrator, or in that case, executive, has to strongly follow the rules within the the defined parameter of rules and regulation. He or she has to discharge responsibility. I'm not denying this. But now this model, control and command model, will not work, fixed in the rigidity of rules and regulation. Somewhere, somehow, if the target is to maximize the outcome, definitely some amount of flexibility, not breaking the rule, but flexibility in, say, rules and regulation, that is also, have to be in place. And in a sense, you can also consider this enabling frame of rules and regulation rather than fixity of rules and regulation. Facilitative administration. How can you play a facilitative role? If you are very much guided by control and command model, hierarchical model of administration and governance, and you are leading institution or organization, this model in the contemporary context perhaps will not work due to the various contexts. Just I was also referring, going through one of the important say, literature. I hope this paper had already been provided by our colleagues. That is about Simon Black. And that captures in the very initial, say, background, the paper articulates this concept that we are in a state of, shift and in a changing context. And therefore, leadership role, responsibilities, and skills have to be aligned with the changing context. So therefore, enabling rules and regulation, interpretation of rules and regulation, flexibility should be one of the important consideration. And finally, facilitative administration. So this aspect is very, very important. In common parlance, all of us come across, even in popular discourses, that now there is a a shift from, say, a trend towards minimum government and maximum governance, or shift from government to governance. These two important points need to be taken into account. Minimum government, maximum governance. It in a sense, it validates the point that you have to go beyond the very rigidity frame of control and command administration to a more flexible, facilitative administration. So with minimum, administrative setup and this maximizing outcome. So maximum governance. Everywhere it should be visible that impact in their outcome is already there. So this important aspect definitely is one of the important development in the case of administration and governance of higher education. Similarly, if we just see the development during the last 3 decades, I would say, number of changes are taking place in higher education. So I'm not just mapping out the changes in higher education, rather I am focusing on how it has impacted the entire say context of higher educational institutional governance. If you are institutional leader, if you are executive leader, definitely these considerations have to be taken into account. So in case of this entire administrative framework, new managerial principle is very much evident. What does it mean? New managerial principle definitely informed by some kind of, in public administration literature that is referred as new public management. So if new public management is in place or it is mandating some kind of reforms in the entire context of administration and governance, the leadership has to be also aligned with this. What is this new public management, or what could be the measurable, say, or identifiable attributes of new managerialism or new public management? Herein, more and more emphasis on say outcome we have already talked about, but generally new public management is also identified with three important: efficiency in terms of delivery of services, that is one. Second is effectiveness. So it is not just delivery, how effective is the delivery? If you are a leader of the institution, what kind of delivery mechanism is in place, whether it is efficient or not, and if it is efficient, it should also, be visible in terms of its effectiveness, and it should be efficacious. So efficacy, efficiency, effectiveness, and efficacy. These are important attributes that also identified with this development of new managerial principle in a sense, the economies of a scale. Economies of a scale in administration and governance. So this economies of a scale definitely within the limited resources and other, the things should be seen in such a way that it is also leading towards maximizing governance and also leading to maximizing the outcome of the in the process. So one of the important attributes here is also in terms of performance management or performance say measurement. So performance measurement of institution, performance management of staff, performance management of executive leader, because the institution or organization are not completely detached from the other sectors in the broader context of say society and its context, and therefore the performance of leader is also subject to measurement, and this or tracking, and this measurement tracking or performance tracking is based on certain quantifiable say parameters. It is not just qualitative that yes, I consider you as a good leader, that will not work. It is measured on the basis of quantifiable parameter 1, 2, 3, 4, and therefore these are important development in terms of say administration and management, and therefore variety of leadership models. I understand that Professor Bhushan in earlier say discussion, he has already discussed about various theories of leadership and various models of leadership. I do not intend to enter into that discussion about models of leadership and theories of leadership, but variety of say skills and variety of models are also articulating these concerns in context of leadership of institute or this. If we are talking specifically about say executive leadership, or so executive leadership, the second component which I would also like to say highlight here, but I perhaps I am making the point. Of course, I do not intend to enter into a kind of monologue. This should be a dialogic say exercise. But first of all, I would like to another say 15 or 20 minutes. Is it all right, Professor Sharma? If are muted.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Uh,
So So after the point which I articulate, then we'll have say discussion on each of this. And I understand that you have already rich experience of managing the system or being a part of the system. Encountering a variety of issues, once you are given the responsibility of executive leader, not just say academic leaders heading one department or one faculty, but executive leader. And here by executive leader, I am referring to institutional leadership as a principal, as a vice chancellor, or a registrar and other such positions. So just I was thinking how to make sense of the whole idea of executive leaders. What could be possible, say, identifiable attributes of leadership, or more specifically of executive leadership? So while I was just going through the literature on the whole idea of executive leadership and leadership skills, one of the earlier, say literature I could identify that was by Errol Kaz, a book that was published in 1955. And in these three important, uh, areas he has identified in terms of leadership skills. So three important areas. First, he is talking about, administrative skill, but it is not in hierarchical mode. This is a kind of encircling, and they are core skills connected with each other. It should not be considered or treated in isolation or detached from one another. So first he is talking about administrative skills. So if you are, say, executive leader, administrative skills are definitely very, very important. So three important within this, he classified this administrative skills in three broad categories. First is technical competence, or competence is very, very important. If you are an executive leader, what are the expected role? Suppose I am appointed as the registrar. If I am appointed as the vice chancellor is a combination of both academic and administrative responsibility. If you are appointed at any of these administrative position, technical skill is there. So technical skill here it is referred as you should be competent in your own area. If I'm a professor of educational administration, I should be very much competent in my subject area. But if it is about executive leadership, the leader has to be very competent in specific areas of not just academic areas, but administration. And therefore, in this case, technical, competence could be also in terms of understanding the context of institution, understanding the context of administration. Your, competence to understand rules, regulations, how it is done. So, in earlier, part, I discussed about that flexibility in terms of rule and rule positions and other. It does not mean the breaking the rule, because that is also important. It has to be aligned with certain demands wherein you can improve your institutional performance. Definitely awareness about your own institutional framework, rules, regulation, and therefore, suppose you are being appointed as a registrar or joint registrar, vice chancellor, or any other, executive leadership position. Definitely, in this case, what is needed is the reasonable understanding about this. Just one example I would like to cite here. That was a program which we were organizing for the principals of colleges. And all these principals were women principals from one of the South states from South India. So then we asked them, what are the difficulties? Do you face any difficulty in terms of managing your institution as a leader? They said that no, by and large, we have served in the college, we are aware about the teaching, we are all specialized knowledge, reasonably, understanding about the rules, etc. So that is fine. But what is important in this case, finance is one which is really, really very difficult component of management. And this is really posing a major problem for us to emerge as effective leader of the institute. Because for financial management, we have to depend on other persons, subordinates, our own, clerks and many times they may not be informing the rule position or financial rules, etc. And therefore, we are always apprehensive of committing mistakes. So what is important here in this case? Administrative skill, first important and foremost important skill is to understand the broader framework of administration in which your institution is, if it is about university, university act, statute, a variety of say rules are there, bylaws are there. So that competence is very much needed. That will enhance the effectiveness of say leadership of the institution. Second is, a skill he's talking about within the administrative skill is about managing resources. So managing resources, I am not just talking about funding and finance, beyond funding and finance. It could be human resources, it could be financial resources, it could be physical resources. So first is mobilizing resources, second is utilizing resources. Allocating and utilizing resources, how resources are being mobilized, how it is being allocated, and optimal say consideration in terms of mobilization and utilization of resources. So that is really, and this is really important aspect of say leadership in contemporary context. I'll come to this aspect little later. Third important component of administrative skill is also talked about managing people. How do you manage people? So generally in management institution, business houses, managing people is the one of the very important consideration. This is also equally important in case of institution. How do you manage people? Manage people, there you cannot expect that everybody will be aligned. Everybody will be, as per your own expectation. They may not be the same, and variety of people there, because it is a part of human nature. And this some people will be very facilitative, very closer to your goals or the way of administration, but others may not. And therefore, it is not that you will keep those people aside. You have to bring them together. You have to negotiate with them, and you have to instill variety of aspect over there. It is whether it is team building, motivating them, or coaching them, mentoring them. So variety of aspects would be definitely related to this, and this is important administrative skill. So there may not be very fixed model of managing the people. It may also depend on individual attribute. But by and large, you have to also take into consideration that you have to start with this premise that diversity of opinion could be, diversity of people would be there, diversity of approach would be there, diversity in terms of performance is there. How do you deal with those kind of people and bring them together and lead as a team? So this is administrative skill. Second is related to interpersonal skill. So in this case, three important skills have been outlined. One is that the person should be socially perceptive. It is not that you are sitting in your own chamber and you are not ever aware about the things which are happening. There is total disconnect with the institution and society. This should not. If it happens, it is bound to be a failure model of executive leadership. So therefore, socially perceptive, leaders, executive leader, that is, very, very important attribute or a skill for a successful executive leader. Second is also emotional intelligence. How do you connect with the people? That aspect has to be definitely taken into consideration. The third important related attribute, I'll discuss this aspect also in little more detail little later. But managing interpersonal conflict in any institution, in any organization, conflict is very much inbuilt, and because the variety of people will be there. Conflict of interest could be there. How the conflict is managed, that is also important attribute of a leader. There may not be a ready-made formula, but you have to be ready to deal with this kind of situation. And finally, the third important component of leadership skill is also related to visions, envisioning. So one is creating vision for your institution. Your institution cannot run and grow, develop without a vision. And second, if it is a vision, a strategic planning for, say, institution. And finally, problem-solving approach on the part of leader. So these attributes or these skills are, emerging from, say literature. But what is needed in this case? Just I was also trying to make sense of the changing context of higher education and what could be the possible area of, say intervention as executive leader. So in this case, first important task to begin with could be in terms of visioning and evolving a strategy of the institution. So in this case, first of all, what is needed is understanding national priorities and international. It could be regional, it could be your own institution, priorities, but definitely it is needed that you should be aware of, the context, and you can set in priorities accordingly, whether, what are the national priorities, what are the international priorities. And in the light of these priorities, the institutional priorities can be set in. Second important attribute could be ability to draw up a vision and a strategic plan. That is very much needed in case of executive leader. Third is ability to understand internal and external environment. So internal, you cannot just remain in ivory tower. You have to go beyond this, say the boundary of administrative office. You have to definitely understand what are the external environment, the first priority I talked about. So similarly, the internal environment of the institution. Suppose that you are being appointed as executive leader of any institution or head of the institution. In that case, definitely this aspect need to be taken into account, that you understand the internal dynamics, internal context of the institution, and also external context. Herein, I am sure that Professor Sharma was perhaps referring during the last discussion with Professor Bhushan, that there is an exclusive session on institutional development plan. And if it is about institutional development plan, I'm sure that SWOT analysis would will be an integral part of the whole exercise of institutional development plan. But if you are talking about certain important, role and responsibility, in order to understand internal and external environment as a successful leader, it is also necessary to have a kind of SWOT analysis, strength, opportunities, and also weakness, opportunities, and challenges. So that aspect had to be also taken into consideration. Definitely, this whole idea of institutional development plan or a strategic plan. So it has its own, say methodology of doing this. I would not enter into this because more resource persons are already listed for the course, but they will definitely they will discuss about this. If in the context of this, what is needed apart from this important role and responsibilities, definitely the skills which I talked about, classifying broadly into three broad categories. Apart from this, is if we are talking about some subsidiary skills of executive leaders, that is communicating skills. So that's the one important point that emerged out of. While I was going through the literature, that the executive leader or institutional leader has to communicate very efficiently and effectively. So if there is ambiguity, perhaps that will create a different kind of say institutional say environment. So therefore, effective communication, whether it is oral communication or written communication, so this should be very very impactful. And one of the important say mandates that is also notable in this context, that confidence of a leader. Even if you are also communicating with the people who are very high stature, sometimes and very, very influential, sometimes intimidating. So how do you communicate with them? You have to communicate with say confidence. Unless you communicate with them with confidence, the entire leadership say framework will collapse, and that will also adversely impact the institution. Their presentation skill, whatever priorities you have defined for your institution, that should be presented, whatever before the stakeholder, be it the society or funding agencies and others. Then definitely some of the important aspects related to relationship, networking skills, community engagement. How do you engage with the community? That is really, really important. Some of the broader categories already I discussed, but people management I already referred to. But this is really important to also understand the aspect of people management, conflict management, say handling space within the institution. These are some of the important aspects that has to be taken into consideration if we are talking about say executive or institutional leadership. Finally, financial planning so budgeting and also say auditing and others aspect has to be taken into consideration. But more than that, financial resource management would also include mobilizing resources, framework of utilizing resources, budgeting and others. So that aspect would be definitely discussed with by more expert persons who are supposed to interact with you. So these are some of the aspects I wanted to flag in for our discussion. I understand that you may have many questions, your own experiences, comments to make. I'll be happy to speak those comments and share with you my own understanding about the whole idea of institutional leadership, or in other words, executive leaders.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kumar Suresh. It has been a very exciting deliberation on when a leader is trying to change and when leader is trying to carry out his vision. He has to take certain aspect and then he becomes the executive leader, because executive leader requires several things. And very interesting, you made that there is a distinction between the general business system and the academic system. Academic system, you made a very important reference to the people who are around, and people who are around are different in the business systems, and they are different in the academic system, and they have their own views, their own ideas, and you would like to how to coordinate with them, how to bring them on the same page, how to make them work on the same vision which you are having, and for that you need a communication and other related aspects. I'm glad that you have gone into depth of the various dimensions of implementing certain things. When a leader desires that he would like to carry out certain changes, then he encounters rules, regulations, internal, external environment, he encounters several other issues, in particular the academic system. Academic system is not very hierarchical oriented system. As a vice chancellor, as a principal of college, and other thing. But at the same time, as he rightly said, that it has to be within the broader framework at the end facilitating in that. Thank you very much for bringing out the very important and in-depth issues with regard to the leader when he becomes executive for carrying out the task. One interesting thing I would like to share with you: many times the leader is executive as an appointed one, but he is also sometimes self-appointed, because some of the nowadays some of the institutions are being managed, and see they become the CEO of the institution. They are leaders, they become the CEO of the institution. They have hold two roles. One is the leader as a leader, other is the executive. And that is when one is appointed, one is self-appointed. Systems are coming in the private university arrangement, etc. So therefore, you have to link it to two different kind of dimensions. Very gladly you brought out that when you are trying to implement your vision, your ideas, you encounter several issues, and you have to handle it more effectively, more deftly. And giving example of even principles, you are given the know-how or the what you call technical competency. Sometimes becomes very important. That technical competencies have to be acquired. The vision has to be acquired for that purpose. Thank you very much for bringing out several aspects. May I open it for the discussion? May I invite Manoj?
Hello.
Hello, Manoj here. Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I express my sincere thanks to Professor Kumar. The deliberation was exciting, and practically he has elaborately mentioned everything for the educational leadership. What are the qualities for an educational leader should have, particularly. But sir, I have I need some elaborate discussion on the your comment that at present day the administration has moved from control mode to flexible mode, or rigid mode to flexible administration. But what we see practically, day by day, it is becoming more and more rigid rather than it is flexible. It is every time we are getting some instruction from our higher authorities, and that is to be implemented, and that the compliance report is to be sent within a particular fixed date. So where is the flexibility at the present day? We don't have at all. We feel that we are just like the persons who are carrying out the orders of the higher authority. So please you elaborate your point that present day our administration has been shifted from control mode to flexible mode of administration.
Good. Thank you for raising a very important point, because by definition, higher education should be autonomous. By definition, higher education institutions should have autonomy to carry out their functions effectively, because they are accountable to students, they are accountable to the society, accountable to the larger system of the country. But sometimes what happens, as Dr. Manoj rightly said, every time some circular, some guidelines, something there, and they are asked to apply not only in words on the written, but also with video films. So therefore, this kind of a contradiction which is taking place in the society, how you are going to resolve this contradiction, which is one side, academic institutions should be autonomous, they should think, they should carry out. Another side, you say that you do that. So how to resolve this contradiction? That is the larger issue. I'll take one more question and then request Professor Kumar Suresh to Usman, Dr. Usman.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Kumar Suresh, for the beautiful introduction to the executive leadership. Actually, in the morning, when the topic was announced, I was wondering what is the role of this executive leadership in higher education. In that way, I was wondering. Only after hearing your introductory part, I came to realize that there is much role for the executive leadership because knowingly or unknowingly, principals and vice chancellors are for this outcome-based administration. For example, within the next 3 years, I want to get, for example, that type of NIR of ranking or that grade in the NAC accreditation in that way. So my administration is outcome-based actually. So in that context, there is much relevance for this executive leadership, I think. My query is related to the second one, the second aspect that you mentioned, the second attribute, the shift from rigid to the flexible model of administration. So in that context, innocent setup of regulatory bodies right from UGC, ICT, and state universities, government, federal government, MHRD, all of them are prescribing several rules and regulations. So in that context, actually the affiliating universities and colleges, they do not have any flexibility at all, including the curriculum. So rightly mentioned by Sharma sir, higher education is to be autonomous. But even in the case of autonomous colleges, there are a large number of restrictions. So in the present context of the regulatory regime, to what extent we can have the flexibility administration? That is my query, sir.
Question you raised, and I'm glad that you've gone into depth of that, the distinction between general leader and when he assumes the role of executive secretary. I think there's a distinction, and that distinction should be kept in mind. Dr. Bhavri, would you have any question? Otherwise, I'll request Dr. Kumar Suresh to respond. Dr. Bhavri?
No question, sir.
Okay.
It's a good one.
Okay. And now, Dr. Kumar Suresh, from these two, and then
Okay, thank you very much. Both of you have raised very, very valid and important question. This is a kind of contradiction. When I was trying to map out the context of higher education and sit in the model of governance, this is it is not just about India. I was referring to the entire context of higher education on the one hand, and another shift in governance. So at the global level, three important models of institutional governance I would like to bring in here that can help us to understand the entire context. One is, of course, collegial model, which is very much practiced in India or ought to be practiced in India, and that is based on, our London model of university, or to larger extent, it is in major, university governance model, wherein you talk about, autonomy, and the institution, within institution, you have collegial culture of shared decision making. So you have variety of, committees. It is not just you are a principal and you are taking all the decision. It is based on consensual decision-making process, which is also coming from department to faculty and then to academic council, executive council, and others. So that is, the model. Second is bureaucratic model. So bureaucratic model wherein the head of the institution, executive leader, is taking all the decisions. What is the context of this? It cannot be seen as individual attribute, individual fault, but it could be also steered by the system, be it state, its agencies, or regulatory system. So if you are saying that our different federal councils and the concern with specific area courses or specialization, medical law and others, that is one, University Grant Commission, AICT and others, they are, or even the government that is and the order is being passed on to the principal or vice chancellor. And if it is, in a sense, for example, that faculty positions have to be contractualized. This cannot be arrived on consensual basis, because faculty in the collegial model, it will not approve, because in that case the head or executive leader has to impose the decision, because he or she is also subjected to external control, external order. Third is now, which is a kind of model which is emerging in generally that is referred in case of European countries. That is entrepreneurial model of university government, wherein the leader who will not just executive leader, entrepreneurial leader in the institution. So risk-taking, thinking beyond, say, given framework of institution priorities he or she may decide. So it can also result into some form of bureaucratic norms imposing within the institution, and idea is to goal achievement, goal realization. So these three more. If we come back to the whole idea, the question which both of you have raised it here, in case of India, I fully agree with this, that it is a kind of contradiction. But if you just see the recent developments in higher education, on the one hand, it is being talked about graded autonomy. So graded autonomy, if you are A graded, you have maximum autonomy to decide about. The National Education Policy 2020 is talking about, in the university system, empowered structure of board of governors. So to the extent of appointing power with the board of governors to appoint the vice chancellor or executive head of the institution, this kind of autonomy is also big. So what is there? The argument here is that reducing the external control and shifting from command and control model to more autonomous, flexible model of institutional governance. This is one. But in reality, I understand that lot of circulars, orders coming in. So I would say that this may be considered as a phase of transition. Definitely this system will not work, because if public funding is diminishing in case of higher education, one of the controlling power is finance. If you are not getting any finance from, say the government, or very meager amount of finance, and you have to mobilize your own finances, so in that case, definitely autonomy of financial utilization, financial mobilization, faculty hiring. So these are the discourses which are also being brought on. The discourses in the public domain in case of higher education. Realization of this kind of autonomy and flexibility, definitely not at the moment in place. But I foresee that definitely this is moving toward that, wherein if you already pointed out that say ranking frameworks or others, you may say that yes, this kind of flexibility would be needed, and for say getting ranked higher, a variety of issues to be addressed. But at the in the current situation in our own higher educational institution, this is really a problematic situation. But as I understand, but in other cases, this is already unfolding in a different way, wherein the idea of, say flexibility in terms of rules, regulations, in order to maximize the outcome, that is also happening. So that is my take on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. One of the way one is looking at is that situations are changing where you are being asked to achieve. When you are being asked to achieve, it is the outcome, and then there is a conflict with rules because they have to be resolved. And in the process of resolving, you might get more freedom than what regulations are right now being doing. Another possibility, in which I don't think it's a good possibility, that they withdraw the funds. When they withdraw the funds, their ability to control you is also gets withdrawn. That's not a good situation. Situation has to be that funds are being made available as a matter of principle, that universities and colleges have to contribute to the development of human resources, development of R&D, development of country. They have to be given that freedom to do carry out their activities outside. Otherwise, we'll not be able to achieve what policy is intending to achieve, what the system is intending to achieve. Thank you very much for very effective communication on this aspect. Pushapnandham Karanam is presently heading the department, as he has carried out several research, and he is also presently having some research work in this field. And now I invite Dr. Karanam to make the presentation, and then we'll have interaction with the participants. All the participants are very senior persons, senior academic as well as senior administrators. So they will definitely bring out certain aspects which are directly related to their working at. I would request you to kindly emphasize on how things are going to be implemented on ground and what are the aspects which come, and particularly you are coming from that region which has a lot of experience in handling the situations of the as an executive, because you have both types of institutions where the private institutions are there, the self-funded, many private universities have come up in that area, and they are there, and other is also the public institutions are there. So I request you to kindly initiate the presentation.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Professor Sharma, for giving me this opportunity to share some of the ideas about executive leadership. And it was nice listening to Professor Kumar, who talked on various aspects about leadership and how this leadership can really make an impact in the organizational growth and development. You know, when you see organizations today, especially educational organizations, they have transformed to a great extent. In a sense, the traditional leadership models may not work with the highly demanding organizations today. And schools, colleges, universities are not exemption. Therefore, the leaders working in these institutions need to keep certain things in mind, and they need to strategically act to accomplish those objectives. Professor Kumar rightly said, when you think of an organization, the organization always keeps certain goals in mind. And the organization strives to achieve those goals. In order to make this process happen, there are certain factors, whether you talk about the planning part of it, whether you talk in terms of the decision-making part of it, whether you talk in terms of the shared vision, communication, and the host of leadership abilities. All these things really contribute to accomplish the institutional goals. Therefore, what is important for the organization is to put the plans into actions. And this is what the executive role of a leadership. And the leadership in action is the leadership of an executive. So the executive roles of leaders are to understand the plans which are prepared, which are linked to the ambitions of the organizations, and then try to link these plans and translate them into effective programs. And to see that these programs are actually done in its real spirit and make some kind of impact on the institutional goals and the institutional progress. So my presentation today, leader as an executive or executive leadership in the organization. I would like to share with you some of the prominent issues with regard to organizations today, especially in the context of education. And the second important aspect which I would like to share with you about the habits of the mind, a book which was written by Peter Drucker, and a very popular book. I rather recommend all the participants here to just have a look at it. The book written by Peter Drucker, a management guru, and the title of the book is The Effective Executive. And there he points out certain strategies for leaders to be effective executives in the organizations. In the third section of my presentation is to bring certain examples and how these executive roles can really brought transformational change in the organizations. So friends, when you see the organizations now, there are three important pieces that every executive leader in the organization worried about, rather concerned about. And one important piece is the people. And the second important piece, their performance. And the third important piece, their progress. And these three pieces are not isolated domains, but they are very much interrelated domains. You talk about people, talk about their performance, and how this performance is really helping in the progress of the organization. These are the three important pieces. Now the leaders need to work on all the three important domains of this organization. They need to work on people, they need to work on their performance, and also they need to work on how the institutional progress, the tangible, intangible progress that is taking place in the organization. Now, the first important piece, working on people, is one of the executive roles of the leadership. As several people defined leadership as an art of inspiring people. Therefore, when you are working with organizations, working with people, it has to be dominated by what you call it as inspirational motivation that the leader can give to the people. And most of the time in the organizations, what happens? Leaders should derive their leadership through their positions. Therefore, the positional power, rather inspiring them, it actually creates a kind of the fear. It creates a kind of power-driven dynamics. It creates a kind of hierarchical positions, and it creates a lot of inhibitions. Therefore, the first executive role of a leader is to understand that leadership in the organizations on people has to be inspirational. So when we talk about inspirational, it is something that you preach and you practice. What you preach, you practice. In a sense, if I'm not able to understand the institutional policies, if I'm not able to respect the institutional values and culture, and I'm expecting my people to value the institutional culture, and therefore a great degree of conflict and a kind of a divide that people can see it. Therefore, the execution role of a leader begins with a leader who is practicing what he preaches. This is one thing which is a very, very important thing. The second important thing when you work on people is to understand that every individual is unique and every individual is important to organizational growth and development. I think here the kind of recognition, the kind of identity, and the kind of the engagement that actually we put in the organizational setup, which also helps people to get motivated. So while working with people, there are certain things that we need to clearly keep in mind as executives. It is not the power, it is not the position that can really help people to work effectively. It is the kind of relationship, it is the kind of social capital that the leader can instill in the organizations by creating an effective organizational culture. I think that's a very important thing as the beginning when you work with people. If we need to work with people, there is no choice. We certainly need to work with people because the organizational commitments, organizational mission can only accomplished with the people and their efforts. So this is one dimension where the executive leaders need to work on people, and working on people needs a special set of competencies. And developing social capital in the organizations can really invigorate the people's commitment and also motivation. And the second important aspect is the performance. We exhibit or exercise the executive leadership to see the performance of individuals are actually improving and are there beyond the expectations of the institutional standards. You know, when you talk about performance in the organizations, there are three sets of analysis one can visualize. One set of analysis is where the people working in our organizations perform exactly what they are expected to perform. Probably most of the institutions with the existing policies and the monitoring mechanism, you try to see people are actually performing as per the performance standards of the organization. But friends, when you want to see the development, this kind of an equation is not sufficient for the organizations to grow. So what has to be done? You need to make people to work beyond their capacities. In a sense, their actual performance in the organizations need to be more than the expected performance. And this is a very difficult task of the leaders. And it needs a number of activities that the leaders need to perform, leaders need to exercise within the organizations. So when you want people to perform beyond their capacities in the organizations, that will certainly lead the organizations towards a progressive direction. Then how this can be done? So this can be done only through creating a kind of an environment in which individuals have that collegiality, confidence in each other, and also learn from each other. I think that is the kind of a learning culture that has to be created in the organizations. And therefore, the executive role of a leader is to understand to what extent the people working in that organization really contribute towards the enhancement of the institutional development. There are three important aspects which are here one has to understand. And one is the abilities of the people. To what extent the individuals are able to perform. The ability talks about the knowledge domain. The ability talks about the skill domain. Therefore, the executive role of a leader is to see to what extent the individuals working in the organization can really contribute to the development in terms of fine-tuning, continuously upgrading their knowledge and skills. And this kind of an activity actually happens only the leaders exercise their executive roles in terms of engaging learners in thinking, engaging the employees in decision making, engaging the people in strategic actions. And that's how you create a community of learners in the organizations. This is the second important aspect when you talk about the organizations and their executive roles. And the third important aspect is the progress. Any action that you implement in the organization must lead towards the institutional progress. When you talk about the institutional progress, especially in the higher education context, or even in the school education context, it means a great deal of learners' satisfaction. It means a great deal of accomplishment of your institutional the goals efficiently, and also to bring out a kind of a branding. I think the branding is also a very popular word today in education system. Branding in the sense how to get the reputation of your organization in terms of your work and your outcomes. I think these are the three important areas where the executive leadership has to work. They need to work on people, they need to work on their performance, and they need to work on the progress of the institution. Therefore, what actually they need to focus on? If they need to work on people, their performance, and the progress, they need to exercise certain responsibilities. One is the planning part of it. The second one is the motivation part of it. And the third one is the inspiring part of it. And the fourth one is the mobilizing part of it. And the fifth is the reflection part of it. And these are the activities that the executive leaders continuously do in their practice in the organizations. So the planning part, the inspiring motivation part, strategizing part, mobilizing, and as well as the reflecting. So these activities continuously help the executive leaders to understand the ground realities, and understanding the ground realities need a thorough reflection. And the moment you understand the ground realities, it will help you to position the vision of the organization in a very, very realistic way. And that's how the institutions experience success in it. So the first and foremost thing that the executive leaders need to look in people is to see to what extent their abilities are updated, their abilities are actually existing in people, and they are exhibiting through their performance. And the second important activity for the performance enhancement that executive leaders need to focus on is the willingness of the people. You know, today, when you talk about organizations, the willingness part is gradually diminishing. The willingness and the ownership of the institutions are very, very important for the institutional growth and success. So how to make people working in the organizations own their institutions? They can own the institutions by developing their willingness part of it. So the executive leaders need to focus on how this willingness, the mindset has to be created within the people, and how that ownership concept can be instilled in the minds of the people working in the organization. I think that part is a very, very important where they need to do it. So now, while implementing these focuses, working on people, focusing on their performance, and also linking the performance to institutional progress, if these three P's are vital for executive leadership, therefore, they need to develop certain very, very important aspects in their mind. The first one, which is a very, very important for the executive leaders to think about mindful activities within the institutions. You know, most of the times we take certain actions as a reaction to something that happened elsewhere. Therefore, our reactions are not the responses to exigencies. Therefore, what is required is any activity that happens in the organizations. It has to be a mindful activities. The mindful activities talks about the growth mindset. So the activity cannot be a kind of a reaction, but it has to be a response to the kind of the developments that takes place in the organization. And the second important aspect that executive leaders need to keep in mind is creating a learning culture in the organization. And thereby, it has to be learning-oriented relationship. This is a very, very important. A learning-oriented relationship develops learning communities. And these learning communities will continuously innovate, continuously put their creative mind, and they can really bring the institutional, the growth and development to great extent. So the second important aspect is the executive leaders create an organizational culture in which learning-oriented relationship is the prime important concern of them. So it is not any relationship which is personally beneficial, but it is a beneficial to everyone, and also the consequence of this relationship is the progress of the institution. And the third important aspect that leaders need to work is the emotional commitment of the people, which is also very, very important. Professor Kumar has rightly pointed out. When individuals perform their duties by force, the moment you talk about executive role, it sounds something like executing your power, executing your the position. But the moment you jump into executing your power and position, people tend to perform by force. And when people perform by force, that endurance of that is not too much. So what is required? What is required is you must make people to perform by their choice. The performance is the choice, is not by force. I think that actually happens when people have the emotional commitment to themselves, the emotional commitment to institutions, and the emotional commitment to the institutional growth and development. I think these are the three underlying principles when you talk about executive leadership. One is the executive leaders always perform mindful activities. They're not simply do the activities in a haphazard way, in a very urgent way, without having any thoughtful mind. And creating a kind of a learning-oriented culture in the organization. The relationships are learning-oriented. And the third important aspect is the emotional commitment, which is also very, very important to do it. Now, the third important aspect, which I would like to talk today, is when you highlight the importance of these executive leaders, there are certain things which leaders need to practice. And these practices have a greater repercussion on the institutional growth and development. Peter Drucker, I was referring to his book, a very important book which talks about the effective executive leadership. The executive leadership is the leadership which translates the strategic plans into effective programs. And the effective programs ultimately result in accomplishing the institutional goals. So in the entire process of translating a policy into program and linking the program into accomplishment of goals, there are certain things which has to be kept in mind. What he talks about is the effectiveness and efficiency. And he also talks about the ethical and the moral leadership. So our goal is not to reach the goal. Our goal is to reach the goal with effective and ethical practices. Therefore, the executive leaders, the effective executive leaders considers ethics, morals, and values as the base for their actions. And friends, this is a very, very, very important for educational organizations. In the light of competition, in the light of reaching to such standards, we know the kind of corruption that's happening in the institutional setup. And earlier we used to talk about the business organizations, but today we could see several of these examples that are happening in educational institutions, only to get a kind of an award or maybe to get a high percentage of pass or promotions. You know, we are actually going beyond our ethical practices. Therefore, this aspect is a very, very important aspect. So the executive leaders strongly believe, the executive leaders need to strongly believe in ethical practice, morals and values that really govern their actions. And if the morals and ethics are not governing their actions, it leads to greater disaster in the organizations. And number two, the Peter Drucker says that effectiveness can be learned. We can learn how to be effective. And we need to practice this. Practice till the effectiveness become a habit. You know, when good things, good values, good morals, if they become the habits of our practice, imagine how the organizations can really flourish. And this is not something impossible. This is very much possible when we keep on practicing till we reach to that level where that value, that moral, that ethics becomes the habit of ourselves. So he continuously say, till you make effectiveness as a habit, you must practice with greater emotional commitment. Therefore, educational leaders and executive role when they are playing, they need to keep this important element in mind, that they need to practice ethical leadership, which has to be the integral part of it. And when he talks about the another important thing, when you make effectiveness as your habit, you can make this effectiveness as your habit with three important ingredients as a effective executive leaders. One is your intelligence, your mind, your thinking, the way you think about your organization, the way you believe in your organization, the way you believe in your people. And then how you actually make use of your people into your institutional growth and development. The moment we believe that the people are your threats, the executive leaders may not allow people to take up responsibilities and then exercise their leadership. And there is no decentralization. So in that context, what happened? We know the leader cannot alone can handle all the work. And therefore, what you believe in your people, that actually reflects in your behavior. The beliefs and the behavior. So, making an intelligent ideas, thinking, reasoning, which is a very, very important activity for making effectiveness as your habit. And the second important aspect is the imagination, visualization, where you want to take your organization. When we talk about the third P, the progress, which talks about if you want to take your organization to new heights, you need to know what kind of height that you are actually taking up. Nowadays, we are working on the NAC visits, where the institution was with the A grade, now going to A+, then looking for A++. And the moment you visualize where you want to take your institution, and the moment you realize the potentials of your individuals, then your executive roles is to delegate the responsibilities and being a kind of a mentor to the people to perform to their maximum and then can reach to the organizational goals. So 3 important elements that are essential. One is your imagination. Second one is your information. And the third one is your initiation. These are the 3 important things that one can make effectiveness as a habit. And the Peter Drucker also says, if you want to be an effective executive leader in the organization, one thing that you need to keep in mind is always to think where your time goes. I think this is a very, very important and the practical problem of most of the leaders working in the organizations. Where does your time go? And most of the time, people say that I don't have time. And then there is a need to reflect where your time goes. Whether your time goes on things which you need to do, which are important and urgent, or which are not important but urgent, which are not important and not urgent, or which are urgent but not important. So the research says, when they talk about leadership, they focus about most of the executive leaders. They actually have a kind of a conflicting situation. And they believe that most of the time is going on the things which are not urgent and not important. And this is something strange. The moment you look quietly and reflect on where does your time go, and you realize whether the time that is you're spending is really on important and urgent things. And the second most area in which the time is spent by executive leaders in the organization is on the things which are not important but urgent. And friends, this is a very interesting finding that we could see in most of the educational administrators. When they see the time management, they find the maximum of the time is spent on the things which are not important but urgent. So the sense of urgency probably coming from the top authority, maybe your vice chancellors, maybe your head, maybe your dean, or maybe the government, maybe the boards. So you need to supply the information, and most of the time is spent on those activities. And sometimes it is the lack of time management of executive leaders. They always land up in performing the things which are urgent. A sense of urgency is always dominated in their executive actions in the organizations. And friends, there is a great danger. There is a great danger when executive leaders work on urgency. Their creative mind and the quality are strictly affected. They only do things to complete within the time, rather than complete with utmost perfection and the quality. And the another important finding that we got when we are dealing with the executive leaders of the university systems, they agreed that when the tasks comes to us, they comes to us as important but not urgent. They are important tasks to be performed. And they are very, very important for the organizations to the development. But it is the lack of planning, lack of execution, lack of concern, and the carelessness actually make these tasks important tasks to urgent tasks, because the time deadline comes closer and you need to perform it. And they say more than 40% of their tasks. It is the responsibility of the executive leaders who make these tasks urgent and important. But these tasks, when they reach to them, which are not urgent but important, but it is lack of planning and the focus of the executive leaders, land up into that situation. And they also agreed, when you act on the tasks which are urgent and important, the quality actually diminishes. Therefore, the executive leaders always need to keep in mind, where does your time goes? And if you are able to manage your time effectively, looking into the organizational tasks, I think you will be able to perform in a better way and also bring the efficiency of the organization to new heights. And the another important aspect.
So it's your time management now.
Sir, I finish in another 5 minutes. Is okay?
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. The another important aspect, which is important for the executive leaders working in any organization, is to build on the strengths. Most of the times we work on the failures, we work on the problems. And sometimes we are successful in solving the problems, or rather we leave the problems after working enough time on them. So in this process, what is happening, we forget, rather not to focus on the strength of the organizations. Therefore, the greater concern is to identify the institutional strengths and then try to exercise leadership in maximizing these strengths to new heights. I think these executive leaders know the strengths of the organization, and the executive leaders also plan a very relevant, realistic plans, and therefore they can really make these strengths can be maximized, and there would be outward contributions of the organizations to a great extent. And for this, at the end, what I need to say, the executive leaders need to have the agility of the brain. The agility of the brain is a very, very important that we need to practice, and we need to train our mind in such a way that we will be adapting to the changing situations. And adopting doesn't mean compromising. Adopting by adherence of the rules, norms that we strongly believe in our institutional setup. The adherence, adoption, and also performance requires the agility of the brain. So finally, I conclude by saying the effective executive leaders need to have the agility of brain, and that we need to practice. Then we can certainly transform the institutions of learning to a great learning organizations. With this, I stop, and I will be happy to address your questions. Over to Professor Sharma.
Thank you very much, Professor. In fact, you have covered larger ground, and you have brought the Peter Drucker to the very foreground to everyone. Agility of mind, you have concluded with that. That covers with the 3 P's you started, 3 P's with the performance, and then you added 3 I's also, imagination, initiative, and implementation. So these all aspects are putting together will lead the organization to higher position, higher attainment, and that would be a system within which you are working. One of the very important points you made, it should be within a kind of organized system where things happen in a more organized, systematic manner. And in fact, you also linked with the Paul theory, which we were trying, making people more able, making them more commitment to the institution, more emotionally committed to the institution. That brings in all the development process. Well, thank you very much. Let's have some questions from our eminent delegates. Who is going to raise the question? Dr.
Sir.
Mauri, would you like to make, or Dr. Osman is coming?
Okay, sir. Bye.
Yes, sir. I would like to just comment that whoever is an educational leader, executive leader, number one, this leader is scrutinized firstly by the organization itself. The executive leader should be honest. He should have a knowledge of what he is doing, and he should give direction, effective direction to the staff if they need. Number two, to err is human. Anyone in an organization can make a mistake, but they should be given that confidence that if you have made a mistake, do not hide it. Bring it to the notice. We will try to rectify it before things go out of hand. And lastly, I would like to say, executive leaders in an organization should see which department or individual is overburdened with work. In fact, the executive leader should themselves go and give their helping hand to such department or such individuals who are overburdened with work. This creates a very healthy atmosphere, and they look up on the leader. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Dr. Manoj, we'll collect few more questions and then Professor will give you a chance to respond. Dr. Manoj, would you have a observation?
Yes, sir. I have some observation that is regarding the time management. This is very crucial now, crucial for the effective leadership, particularly executive educational leaders. Managing the time is very important, but it is also very difficult. The thing is that whenever an educational leader or the institutional head is thinking that some work is very important and it has some limited manpower to do that, under that circumstances, some sudden urgency, urgent work or some urgent instructions comes to the educational institutions, which is to be done on urgent basis and it is to be replied. And nowadays, you know that the mutual trust between government agencies and the educational leaders has reduced. And nowadays, they not only desire to get the response, sometimes they need some photograph with geotagging also. So under these circumstances, those who were felt that these are very important, these are delayed, and we have to focus on those who are considered to be urgent and most important before our higher authorities. So how to organize this or how to manage this particular part?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Manoj. Dr. Osman?
No, thank you, sir, for the highly eloquent and inspiring presentation. See, you mentioned 3 P's. The second one, the performance part. Actually, in practical situation, we are facing the issue of incentives, because the incentive system is not exactly in the control of the leaders, because the incentive system is based on some rules and regulations and so on. So academic leaders very often, they are not having any control over the incentives, except for some kind of moral incentives, some just patting and some I think some. So to make a person to work more than his capacity, as you rightly said, we need some incentives. So how it can be practiced in a situation of rules and regulations, and also incentives which are not our control.
Okay,
Thank you,
good.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good. Gogoi, you have some point? Gogoi, do you have some point? You make yourself unmute. Yes.
Yes, sir. Only one specific observation, sir. The presentation has been nice, and he is very rightly saying that the executive leaders should have ethical practices for the performance in the institution. So, for in the Indian context, so my observation goes, there is no a concrete, higher education policy yet, and that creates a problem. National Education Policy 2020 is focusing that points. That is why what is problem for the ethical practice in the colleges or the principal to the vice chancellors. So the files are not moving. I am frankly speaking. So files are not moving in the government offices without bribing. Under such circumstances, how the executive leaders can, develop and practice ethical practice in the colleges and universities. That is my most concerned question.
Okay. Thank you, Gogoi. Doctor from Kawa, Katoch, do you have any observation or question? Denny.
Sir, I totally agree with Mr. Sir, after the abrogation of Article 370 here in Jammu and Kashmir, things have gotten very worse in the education sector. So, bureaucratic role has been very important in the education sector here in Jammu. I really want to, ask you, and I really want to I really need your help to understand the bureaucracy scenario. And as Mr. Gogoi has said that the files are not moving without any bribe. I think in the northeast, same is the case in Jammu and Kashmir area also. We are providing education since last 25 years, and we have been, involved in technology also, bringing as sir is in all the education facilities. So the thing is that we are facing a lot of problems in our area, in these kind of areas, sir. Okay. So kindly assist in this, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Mohammed Ali, you have any question?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Yeah. Sir, in our higher education system, sir, this efficiency chart, sir, especially in colleges. So, how can we prepare the efficiency chart of faculty members, sir? Because faculty members and their outcome, suppose their performance outcome is coming, but the contribution from different faculty towards a particular course. So, the efficiency chart making is complex, sir. So, is there any solution to tell, sir?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We had many observations on this aspect, and realities and the ideals. There is always some kind of gap. There is always a hiatus between the realities and the ideals. And ideals are very important, and one has to really try to muddling through what I call it's a muddling through process within which the system is working. Anyway, now let me invite Sir Kanan to make few observations. Then I'll ask Kumar Suresh to make few observations before we close today's interaction. Dr. Kanan. You unmute. Dr. Kanan, unmute yourself.
Yes, yeah. I'm very happy to listen to the expressions of the participants. One participant rightly said that the educational institutions need to practice the values and the ethics, that every decision and every action that is implemented in the institutions need to have the element of these values, morals, and ethics. Why? Because we know that we are actually building up the future of the entire generation, the students and the kind of the learners who are with us. They only learn what actually we are doing it. Therefore, it is must. And then the reality, when you have somebody said in a particular state or in a particular the educational sector, you find that are malpractices that happens. Now we need to understand as a strong educational leaders, when we believe that educational practice need to be guided by ethics and values. Therefore, it is our role to transform, make people to realize and to sensitize. And I know that this is a long process. In this process, you may sacrifice few things, but it is worth sacrificing. When you are able to change one individual, one institution in understanding the consequences of his unethical practice on the larger educational sector, I think this needs a greater commitment and the perseverance of the educational leaders who strongly believe that ethics are very, very vital and important. And we have choice again, whether you leave your ethical practice and get into the practical things to make your work done. And the question remains, how long you can do that? To what extent you can satisfy a person to perform his duties? So we need to seriously think about it. And we have reached to a level, a knowledge-based society, an information-based society, and also we are living in what you call the rights and responsibilities. There are not many instruments that we have in the society today, and how effectively we can understand and make use and also transform these settings into an effective settings. This is up to us. And the third important aspect, somebody rightly pointed out, if you want to make people to perform, the incentives are very, very important. Now, the moment you understand the incentive in terms of probably the monetary benefits, and those monetary benefits are certainly not in the hands of a principal of a college or the head of an institution. They are more or less linked with the government policies. So now, what incentives an institution, a college-based incentives, and institution-based incentives that the institutional leader can think of in terms of recognition, in terms of appreciation, in terms of creating an environment where people collectively learn, and the dignity that the institution can give to their employees. And believe me, the dignity and the respect that the institution gives to an employee is much more worth than the monetary incentives that the employee gets. I think this kind of a thing which is proved through several research studies. Therefore, what is lacking and what our employees need, what our teachers need today is the freedom to work and also the dignity of the work and the respect and the recognition. I think these things are absolutely lacking in our institutions. Maybe there are several reasons behind it. Therefore, how we can really practice this and those things can act like the incentives for employees to perform better. So at the last, I would like to make one very, very important research finding. I would like to present before the very experienced administrators now. The research says when employees leave the organizations, what we call it as employee attrition, and employees leave the organization not because the tasks are difficult, but they leave the organizations because the leaders are difficult. I think we need to seriously think about this, how to make our leadership more user-friendly, more mentoring, and more supportive. I think that's what required for the organizations to get transformed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for effectively pointing out that there are areas where you can search yourself to help people or incentivize people by giving dignity and respect to the people, because there are several needs which gives. Besides monetary needs, there are also recognition needs, their reputation needs, etc. Well, very well, effectively suggested, and you also brought out that how what research has shown that it is to be that a person who are in the organization should feel very much committed to organization, and then the difficulty part, either from the employee or from the leader's part, has to be resolved if the organization has to grow. Dr. Kumar Suresh, would you like to make some observations? Last few.
Thank you. Most of the questions have already been answered by Professor Pushapnandham. So just I was also following the question and this. So no specific question addressed to me, but just I would like to say something about the performance which Dr. Muhammad Ali had pointed out. In fact, this is
Thank you, sir.
create a culture of performance rather than monitoring through quantitative measures or scale, etc. Culture of performance that should be built in the institutional culture, and definitely may not work. So that is just one, and this will depend on executive leader, how he or she creates a culture of performance and as a part of institutional culture. That is the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Manoj,
Thank you so much, sir.
How do we manage our time under the situation which are there? I think there could be some elaboration on this, but what I would like to hold on for some time, one of the questions which both the speakers have said, that planning for execution. And we are going to a next module which is going to be planning. And there you would find that most of the things which if you have planned in advance, then your time management becomes more effective and fit way. So I would suggest that please hold on. There are certain clues for the time management, but that clues can be given to you. Much more is that when we are going to discuss the next module on planning and plan implementation, some of these issues are answered. So I would suggest that hold on this issue. Any clue which Karanam, would you like to give any clue? Time management 1, 2, 3, 4 clue. Yeah. Go ahead. You're unmute. You have to unmute. Karanam, you unmute yourself. Yeah. For quick clues. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. Yeah. See that this is a very important area when you talk about executive role of a leader, because the leader's time usually goes, and it is always a complaint from the leaders that the time is not adequate or time is not sufficient. So here, when you need to understand that not all activities have to be done by you, is the first important principle, where you should be able to distinguish how you can delegate the tasks to right people. Therefore, creating a second generation of leaders within the organizations, building the teams, is a very, very important for effective time management. The moment you think that every activity has to be done and performed by you, and then you land up in problems. Therefore, understanding the importance of the work and the urgency of the work, then your procrastination and the delegation can really help you to manage your tasks and also perform your work effectively, efficiently, with high quality. I think that's what is required. Therefore, the leaders need to be distinguish the tasks, whether they need to do, they need to address, or they can be addressed by the other leaders within the organizations which are groomed by you. I think that grooming of the leaders within the organization is the missing link. Therefore, the time management becomes a big issue. Therefore, the collaborative management, collaborative leadership, has to be practiced to handle these issues more amicably and effectively. This is what I would like to say and stop here, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think there has been a lot of good discussion. I would only suggest you to, you have provided in the reading in praise of incomplete leader. This in praise of incomplete leader by Harvard University, after doing a lot of research, they have come out with a delegation system and how do you really perform best and you should praise the person who is incomplete in the sense that he is not doing everything on himself, but he is enabling things to happen. So I would suggest you to go through Manoj and other friends, go through this good article, which is I already put in the reading list, in praise of incomplete leader. It has been developed by Harvard University after a lot of research. I think today has been very, very exciting and very useful discussion on this aspect. Next Thursday, we are going to have two new aspects. One is the one changing situation now we are facing. Changing situation you have faced last 2 years, but it has been happening for last several years, which we call fourth industrial revolution. We are going to have discussion on fourth industrial revolution. There's one point was made by Professor and other people, entrepreneurship. Vikas wanted to share some idea on entrepreneurship as a leader, as an entrepreneur. And another aspect which is now coming is the neuroscience and leadership. So we are going to a neuroscience and leadership discussion. Thank you very much for effective participation. Thank you all. Thank you very much. We'll go through the module content which is given in the LMS and also articles which are there. You might find quite useful them. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, then we wind it up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Good night, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.